The parking lot outside Whitmore Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy buzzed with the sounds of slamming car doors and distant thuds from heavy bags inside. Kiana Moore sat quietly in her car for a moment longer than most, watching the brick building through a fogged windshield. The air was thick with late summer humidity, but she made no move to roll down the window. She was used to discomfort. As she adjusted the black hoodie draped over her lean frame, her fingers brushed the small scar above her brow, a reminder of battles far more dangerous than anything awaiting her in this gym. Still, the weight of what she was about to walk into settled around her like armor. The moment she stepped inside, the smell hit her first sweat rubber mats and male ego. The front desk attendant didn't look up from his phone until she stood directly in front of him. His name tag read Troy, but his smirk said more than his badge ever could. "You sure you're in the right place?" he asked without humor, already exchanging glances with someone behind her. Kiana didn't flinch. "I'm sure." Her voice was calm, unwavering. Troy tossed a clipboard toward her, not even bothering to make eye contact. "Fill it out. Waivers on the back. Coach will decide if you're a good fit." Kiana took the form, filled it out with practice speed, and returned it without a word. The room quieted as she moved toward the mat space. Eyes tracked her steps, some amused, others skeptical, but all dismissive. No one offered a greeting. No one welcomed her. She was a stranger in a domain that didn't care for outsiders, especially not women who looked like her. The gym was filled with white belts and blue belts, mostly men, all seemingly bonded by some unspoken code that didn't include her. Still, she stood at the edge of the mat with perfect posture, her presence grounded in something deeper than the moment. She wasn't here to prove herself to anyone. Her reasons ran deeper, older, and though every glance cast her way was heavy with doubt or disdain, Kiana met none of them. Her gaze remained fixed ahead. Controlled, calm. She knew how to be underestimated. She had made a career of it. Coach Whitmore finally emerged, a stocky man with a black belt cinched too tightly around his waist and a voice that filled the space like a foghorn. "Looks like we've got a new face," he announced, eyes already set on Kiana, with judgment baked into his grin. "You ever trained before?" he asked. Some Kiana answered, keeping her tone neutral. His smirk widened. "Well, we'll see what some means." The room chuckled. The message was clear: she was expected to fail. But Kiana didn't rise to it. She simply nodded, stepped onto the mat and began to warm up. No theatrics, no declarations, just movement, fluid, efficient, precise. Her hoodie remained on, masking the form beneath. If anyone noticed the coiled discipline in her footwork or the economy of her breathing, they didn't say so. But that was fine. She hadn't come for validation. She had come to begin. Warm-up drills began with the usual chaos forward rolls, shrimping sprawls. No one approached Kiana to partner. She was left to mimic from a distance alone in a sea of pairs. Eventually, Coach barked an order and Troy was sent her way. "Lucky me," he muttered, kneeling between her legs for a basic guard-passing drill. His instructions were rough, impatient, and laced with sarcasm. "Put your hands here, legs like that. Not that it matters," he added, elbowing her thigh with unnecessary force. "I'm going to pass anyway." Kiana didn't flinch. She absorbed the contact, made a minor adjustment, and followed his commands without resistance. But when it was her turn, everything changed. Her movements were clean, deliberate, and too sharp for someone who supposedly had only some training. She passed his guard with surgical precision, not explosive but efficient, just enough to make him notice. Troy's eyes narrowed. "Beginner's luck," he muttered. But the tension in his jaw told a different story. The class moved into more complex drills, and Kiana's technique continued to shine beneath her understated exterior. She didn't draw attention, but she didn't need to. A few students began to glance in her direction when she executed a transition perfectly, or escaped from a compromising position with ease. Still, no one acknowledged her skill. It was easier to pretend she didn't belong than to confront what that might mean. Troy, now visibly annoyed, began applying more force. He ramped up his strength, trying to unbalance her or rush submissions, But Kiana adapted effortlessly. Her counters were never flashy. She simply neutralized aggression with quiet discipline. It became clear, at least to anyone paying attention, that she wasn't just lucky. She was trained. Well, but when class ended, the unspoken wall around her remained. No one congratulated her. No one offered a nod of respect. She was still the new girl, still black, still female, still invisible in a gym built to reflect only one kind of warrior. Kiana untied her belt slowly, folded it with care, and packed her gear in silence. She had made her first impression, and it was exactly what she wanted. She was being underestimated. That was the first mistake. As she stepped out of the gym that night, the air felt cooler than before. She paused for a moment, letting her breath steady. Troy and his smirks, the sideways glances, the dismissiveness, they were all predictable. They were loud, but Kiana, she had learned to move in silence, and in silence she would build her storm. The days that followed were more of the same. Coach Whitmore continued his subtle but relentless campaign of disrespect, assigning Kiana the most aggressive partners, singling her out during warm-ups, and loudly reminding others that this wasn't a cardio kickboxing class. Logan Bradley, the gym's self-appointed king, laughed the loudest. Each time she trained, Kiana felt the weight of scrutiny, like walking through a minefield where every misstep would be weaponized. She said nothing. Not when Logan called her sweetheart in front of the class. Not when she overheard two brown belts joking that she probably joined just to post selfies in a GI. She endured it all with the kind of composure that confused them, mistaking her silence for submission rather than strategy. But beneath the calm surface, she was gathering data, observing weaknesses, memorizing patterns. Just like in the field. Amidst the testosterone and bravado, one voice stood out, Cody. A young white belt with soft eyes and nervous energy, he was the only one who offered her an ice pack after Troy went too hard on her shoulder. "They don't like people who look different around here," he whispered once, glancing at the all-male leaderboard. Kiana simply nodded. She already knew. But it meant something to have an ally, even a quiet one. Still, the pressure mounted. Her name wasn't on the board. Her presence was rarely acknowledged unless it was to mock her. She trained harder, earlier, later, alone. Sometimes Rachel, the coach's niece, would observe her silently. Kiana noticed, but neither said a word. That was fine. She didn't need allies. She needed time. Late one night, Kiana sat in her apartment with a military belt in her lap. Not a Jiu-Jitsu rank, but the kind earned in deserts and blood. Next to it, a photo of her and her brother, both in fatigues, both wearing the insignia of a unit that didn't officially exist. Spectre. That was the name they gave her. A ghost. A whisper. A myth. The gym had no idea who they'd let through the door. As she tucked the belt away and prepared for bed, Kiana whispered into the darkness, "I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to remember who I am." And when she walked back into the gym the next day, nothing had changed on the surface, but something within her had realigned. She wasn't just training anymore. She was waiting for the invitation to strike. It came on a Friday night challenge day, a gym tradition cloaked in bravado and spectacle. Coach Whitmore gathered the class with a grin that never quite reached his eyes. "Time to test who belongs," he announced, his gaze lingering on Kiana. Logan bounced on the balls of his feet, grinning like a man already planning his victory speech. Kiana stood at the edge of the circle, her hands steady, her expression unreadable. Coach laid out the terms. 1 round. No time limit. Submission only. If Kiana won, she earned a year's membership. If she lost, she had to leave the gym for good. The crowd chuckled. Logan flexed. The bet was clearly meant to humiliate her, but Kiana just nodded. "Deal," she said, and the room fell into a brief, uncertain silence. The match began. Logan charged forward, confident in his size and reputation. Kiana didn't flinch. She sprawled, perfectly countered, flowed into position, and then without warning, she struck. In one fluid motion, she locked in a triangle choke. Logan struggled, flailed, tapped. 14 seconds. The room fell dead silent. 14 seconds. That's all it took, Coach stammered. Logan sat gasping. Phones had captured every frame. The moment wasn't just real, it was undeniable. Spectre had arrived. Kiana stood adjusted her rash guard and looked around the stunned faces. That was the deal, she said calmly. A year's membership. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some laughed in disbelief. Others looked away, embarrassed at what they had assumed. Cody grinned from the back, already pulling out his phone. Logan tried to shout about a rematch, about cheating, but the room had already moved on from him. And Kiana stepped off the mat the same way she had stepped onto it, silent, composed, deadly. Not a beginner, not a victim, and no longer invisible. She was Spectre, and the war had just begun. The video didn't just go online, it detonated. Cody uploaded it quietly that night, unsure if anyone would care, but by morning it had already crossed 50,000 views. The footage was crisp, undeniable. Logan Bradley, the pride of Whitmore's gym, submitted in 14 seconds by a woman no one had taken seriously. No dramatic editing, no flashy music, just raw proof that skill didn't come with gender or skin color. And the internet couldn't get enough of it. Comments flooded in. Some were confused, others celebratory. But the tone quickly shifted into collective awe. "Who is she?" one commenter asked. "Is this real?" asked another. The narrative unraveled. Fast, Logan's reputation turned inside out. The same people who once sang his praises now turned him into a meme. The mockery was brutal and viral. His signature line, 14 seconds sweetheart, now played over slowed footage of him tapping furiously beneath Kiana's legs. It wasn't just defeat, it was cinematic justice. Coach Whitmore attempted damage control immediately. He posted a vague statement on the gym's social media, calling it a teachable moment and claiming the match was informal. But it backfired. Screenshots of his previous posts mocking female practitioners resurfaced. People compared them with the match footage, and suddenly the story wasn't just about a woman submitting a man, it was about exposing the culture that had allowed that arrogance to grow unchecked. Meanwhile, Kiana didn't say a word. She let the footage speak. Her silence became part of the legend. While Logan scrambled to restore his image and Coach Whitmore issued passive-aggressive statements, she trained. Alone, quiet, focused. Her absence from the online conversation only intensified the mythos. Who was she? How had she done it? Why wasn't she chasing interviews or social media followers? Her mystery became her message. Cody, stunned by the response, received interview requests, podcast invites, even inquiries from Jiu-Jitsu media outlets. "Are you her coach?" they asked. "Was this a setup?" He laughed nervously each time, insisting she trained alone. "She's not mine," he said. "She's just better." And she was. A symbol. Yes, but also a mirror held up to the world of martial arts, reflecting the hard truth. Respect isn't given, it's earned, sometimes violently. By the week's end, Kiana had gone from invisible outsider to whispered legend. Students began asking for drills she had demonstrated. Even the brown belts watched old footage, trying to reverse engineer her submissions, but none of them really understood what they had seen. They still believed it was about Jiu-Jitsu. For Kiana, it never was. It was about reclaiming space, and she had just begun. It came late at night in the quiet of her apartment, an email from an anonymous address. No text, just a single attachment. Kiana hesitated before opening it. The moment the image loaded, the world around her seemed to tilt. It was a grainy surveillance photo of a man walking through a crowded market desert, clothes a half-covered face, but unmistakably him. Her brother. The same man they said was dead. The timestamp read July 2018, 6 months after his supposed death. Kiana sat back, breath caught somewhere between grief and fury. She stared at the photo like it might vanish if she blinked. It was him, alive, moving, somewhere. The photo didn't confirm safety, only existence, and in some ways that made it worse. They lied, not just to her, but about her, about everything she had sacrificed and why. That night, sleep never came. She lay awake, clutching the photograph, listening to the static of memory and betrayal. Meanwhile, the internet had started piecing together its own truth. Online forums began buzzing about Spectre, a rumored Black Ops operative known for impossible close-quarters skills. The triangle choke, the fluidity, the refusal to showboat it all aligned too well with military combat training. Someone on a private message board posted, "That's Spectre." I rolled with her once. She doesn't spar, she dissects. The myth was no longer a secret. Cody was the first to bring it up in person. He showed up outside the gym one morning, eyes wide. "They're saying you were military, special projects, black-level clearance." Kiana didn't answer, but her silence only confirmed what Cody already knew. Rachel, having pieced together fragments over weeks, confronted her in the locker room. "That belt you hide, it's not from Jiu-Jitsu, is it?" Kiana looked at her and said only, "No." Together, Cody and Rachel began uncovering something deeper: money trails from the gym burner phone records and quiet connections to a man named Colonel Marcus Avery. A name buried in classified history. A man tied to Project Emberlight, the very ghost program that had trained Kiana and her brother. The whispers grew louder. Whitmore's gym wasn't just toxic, it was a front, and someone was pulling the strings. As the truth unspooled, Kiana stood in the eye of a storm she had tried for years to forget. She had spent so long burying her past, it was surreal to watch it resurrected in real time. But this time she wouldn't run. Not when the trail led to her brother. Not when she could finally burn down the system that built her and then tried to erase her. The next message was clearer. An anonymous email this time with text, "You want the truth? Come find it." Attached were GPS coordinates, remote isolated deep in the desert. The location matched an abandoned black site facility rumored to be used by off-books military contractors. Cody warned her it was a trap. Rachel offered to drive. Kiana packed light and packed ready. Some truths could only be pulled from fire. They arrived in silence. The desert stretched endlessly on either side. Heat waves blurred the horizon. From a distance, the facility looked dead, weather-worn buildings, rusted fencing. But Kiana spotted it instantly, the surveillance cams disguised as debris, the fresh tire tracks, the disturbed gravel. "They're watching," she murmured. Still, she walked toward the gate. Cody and Rachel followed close, trusting her instincts over their fear. A man met them at the door. Tactical build, sunglasses, scar along his jaw. Spectre he greeted without emotion. Kiana didn't flinch. "Who's inside?" she asked. "Someone who remembers," he replied. They followed him through dim corridors, past shuttered labs and old server rooms. Some doors bore markings in Arabic. Others had biometric locks still blinking green. This was no relic. This place was alive and operational. They were brought to a command center, modern, humming cold. At its center sat Colonel Marcus Avery. Gray hair, impeccable suit, eyes like razors. He stood as they entered, his posture straight as a flagpole. "Sergeant Moore," he said. Or should I say Spectre. Kiana didn't respond. Her gaze went to the screen behind him, an aerial photo of another compound. "Your brother's there," Avery said calmly. "Alive. Waiting." He offered her a deal. 1 year of service, 3 operations, covert work under his direction. Do it, and her brother goes free. No more surveillance, no more secrets. "You walk out now," Avery warned. "He stays a ghost forever." Rachel flinched. Cody looked ready to shout, but Kiana didn't hesitate. "I decline," she said coldly. "I'm not your weapon anymore." Avery's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake." Kiana took a single step forward, her voice low and lethal. "You already made yours. You thought I came here alone. But I didn't come to be recruited. I came to burn this place down." The first move was Avery's. He reached beneath the table, likely for a weapon. 2 guards flanked the doors, but Kiana had already calculated the angles. In one fluid strike, she disabled the nearest operative with a blow to the throat, swept his legs, and used his falling body to block the second's lunge. As chaos erupted, Rachel and Cody sprinted down the corridor. Kiana snatched a hard drive from Avery's coat and vanished after them. Alarms blared, red lights flashed. The sterile calm of the facility turned to confusion and panic. Kiana led her team through an emergency tunnel she'd spotted earlier. Behind them, boots pounded against concrete. Voices barked orders. But the three of them kept moving through steel doors, maintenance shafts, and shadowed passageways once meant for ghosts. They emerged into the desert just as an armored vehicle roared to life behind them. Avery's silhouette was visible behind the wheel. "He's getting away!" Rachel cried. "Let him," Kiana muttered. Her eyes weren't on the car, they were on the detonator in her palm, a small black device with a single blinking light. Time to erase a mistake. As the SUV pulled away, Kiana pressed the button. The explosion didn't scream. It boomed, rising from the earth in a wave of fire and ash. One after another, secondary blasts ripped through the compound. Black smoke clawed at the sky. The base, its secrets, its corridors, its lies, was reduced to rubble in less than 2 minutes. Cody stared in shock. "You just blew up a government facility," he whispered. Kiana turned to him, her expression stone calm. "No," she replied. "I destroyed a prison that pretended to be one." Rachel, panting from the sprint, leaned against the SUV and whispered. Now what Kiana looked at the flash drive in her hand. "Now, we expose everything." That night, they drove in silence. The hard drive hummed in Kiana's lap like a loaded gun. It held names, missions, records, the foundation of Avery's empire. And now it was in her hands. The desert behind them burned, but ahead was something bigger. Truth, consequence, war, and Kiana. She was done hiding. Now it was her turn to play offense. In the weeks following the explosion in the desert, Whitmore Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy stood still, quiet, hollow, and marked by its toxic past. The once bustling gym, now abandoned by its leaders, felt more like a monument to downfall than a place of growth. But Rachel saw something else in it. She saw a space worth redeeming. With Cody's help and quiet support from a few senior students who had grown disillusioned with Whitmore's regime, they began the process of reclaiming it. The first step was removing the name. The second was giving it a new one, Mat 14 BJJ, a subtle, powerful nod to the moment Kiana had turned the tide in 14 unforgettable seconds. Walls were repainted, trophies rearranged, and old photos taken down. Where once stood images glorifying dominance and ego, now hung quotes about respect, resilience, and self-mastery. Kiana, true to her nature, didn't take ownership. She trained off hours, slipping in during the early mornings or late nights when few were around. Sometimes she and Rachel would roll in silence. Sometimes she coached Cody on more than just transitions and guard passes. She taught him how to breathe under pressure, how to think beyond the next move, how to feel intent before it formed into action. For Cody, the lessons became life-changing. Under Kiana's guidance, he transformed from the shy, underestimated white belt into something much stronger, a mindful practitioner with purpose. But it wasn't just technique. She trained his focus, his intuition, and his endurance. "You don't win by overpowering," she told him one evening after a spar. "You win by knowing exactly where to apply pressure and when not to." Despite her growing mythos, Kiana remained under the radar. No social media, no interviews. Her only concern now was intelligence. The hard drive she'd taken from Colonel Avery's pocket was slowly being decrypted, and every day brought new pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet name. Some files were redacted, others scrambled, but a few confirmed what she suspected: Avery had operated beyond government oversight for years, and Project Emberlight wasn't as dead as she'd hoped. Still, Kiana knew better than to chase shadows blindly. She worked methodically, cross-referencing locations, matching names with whispers from her past. The gym became more than a training space. It became her sanctuary, her quiet war room. And in the silence between rolls and breathwork, she plotted, waiting, preparing. Rachel, too, had evolved. No longer just the niece of a disgraced coach, she had found her own voice on the mat. Her instruction style rejected intimidation and emphasized understanding. She encouraged students to ask why, to experiment, to grow. And though she never said it out loud, everyone in the gym knew Mat 14 BJJ was built on Kiana's courage. She was the flame that burned down the old and made space for something better. The National Jiu-Jitsu Expo drew competitors and spectators from across the country. It was a place for legends to be made and sometimes unmade. Kiana had no intention of attending, but when an invitation arrived requesting her to demonstrate advanced transitions, she accepted. Not for recognition, but for control. If whispers were already shaping her story, she would rather guide the narrative than leave it to rumor. She arrived in simple attire, no patches, no rank, just a black rash guard and calm presence. Her name on the schedule was enough to fill the main hall. People packed in phones, raised, waiting to see the woman who had dismantled Logan Bradley not once but twice. As she warmed up, a commotion stirred at the back of the venue. Logan was here, thinner now, less swagger. He cut through the crowd like a man on a mission. "I want a rematch," he said, voice loud but steady. The organizers hesitated, but the crowd responded with a surge of excitement. Kiana looked at him, studying his face. There was no arrogance in his eyes, only need. 5 minutes. Point system, she agreed. No ego, just jiu-jitsu. And so they rolled. The match was different this time. Logan had trained, prepared. He countered her sweeps, anticipated her grips. He pushed her, and she let him, choosing not to humiliate, but to teach. The 5 minutes passed like a breath, and when it ended, Kiana had won by points, not submission. Logan sat back exhausted and extended his hand without prompting. "Good match," he said. And for the first time, he meant it. Kiana took the mic after the match, invited by the organizers to say a few words. She stood at the center of the mat, the crowd's silent, phones pointed like spotlights. "I didn't come here to prove anything," she began. "I came because I believe this art deserves better. Jiu-Jitsu isn't about domination. It's about discipline, respect, and growth." Her voice was even, but it carried the weight of 1,000 silent stories. She spoke about the culture she had encountered, one where women were mocked, where race became a reason for exclusion, and where power was used not to uplift, but to crush. "Change doesn't start with medals," she said. "It starts with who we protect, who we listen to, and what kind of community we're building on these mats." The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was long, sustained, a wave of recognition that washed across the room. In that moment, Kiana had become more than a fighter. She was now a standard, a voice, a reckoning. It arrived in a plain envelope dropped off at the front desk of Mat 14. Inside was a single photo, Kiana's brother, alive and well, holding a newspaper dated that morning. He stood in front of an unfamiliar building, and though the photo seemed ordinary, Kiana spotted the message immediately. His fingers, the paper's angle-coded signals, meant only for her. He was free. He was aware. He had agency. But it also meant something else. Someone was watching. Someone wanted her to know that the game wasn't over. It had just evolved. Kiana sat alone that evening in the gym's meditation room. The photo rested beside her. The weight of it wasn't just emotional, it was tactical. If he had sent it, then he was communicating through dangerous channels. If someone else had, it meant surveillance was active and hostile. Either way, it was bait, and she knew it. But that didn't mean she wouldn't bite, just that she would do it on her terms. When Rachel and Cody entered the room, they didn't need an explanation. They could read it on Kiana's face, the tightness in her shoulders, the stillness in her hands. "He's alive," she said simply, "and he's telling me something." Cody's expression darkened. "It means they're still out there." Rachel nodded. "It means we're not done yet." Kiana didn't respond immediately. She rose to her feet, tucking the photo into her journal. "We've started something here," she said quietly. "And now they see it. The fire. The people standing beside me. This gym. This movement. It's not just about jiu-jitsu anymore. It's about pushing back against the kind of control they thought we'd accept forever." Outside, the city carried on as if nothing had changed. But inside Mat 14, something was stirring. Students were arriving early, staying late. People were training harder, listening more, asking deeper questions. The community was shifting, and Kiana was at the center of it. She didn't wear a belt. She didn't give orders. She led by simply being. In the shadows, Colonel Avery's network might still operate. There were still files to decode operatives, to track truths to be unearthed. But Kiana no longer stood alone. With Rachel's clarity, Cody's digital reach, and a community now awakened, she was building something stronger than silence. And the next time they tried to corner her, she'd be ready. Spectre wasn't retreating, she was regrouping, and war was coming. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of injustice and the quiet strength of someone who chose to rise anyway, we invite you to join us. Subscribe to Deep Inside HQ for more powerful narratives that uncover the truth behind silence and shine a light on the overlooked, the underestimated, and the unbreakable. Your voice matters. Your presence adds to the change. So stay with us and be part of the story that refuses to be ignored.